Hello, everyone. So today I am here with Brad RenderMan Haines to talk about the Flipper Zero, and specifically that Canada wants to ban these things. They've said that this is a car theft implement, which I guess makes me a master criminal. So if you don't know who he is, you're probably somebody who doesn't go to things like DEF CON and so forth, but he's notable for a number of things, including getting a medal from the Alberta government for helping them secure their data, which really it's the Alberta government. They don't have any data. It's our data. But also things like the Internet of Dongs project, which I know sounds silly, but is actually a pretty serious thing because there's more and more companies are making adult toys and not necessarily thinking about things like adult level security for these things as opposed to, basic stuff. So if I'm not judging anybody, if you're using one of these toys and it doesn't get hacked and rip your bits off, it might be because of work that he's done. So have I missed anything out in that there?
I have been in this doing the hacker and security thing for 25 years. My first DEF CON was 1999, DEF CON 7. There are literally people bringing kids now that they weren't even alive when I first started going. Like it's kind of disturbing. But yeah, I'm considered an old timer around there. Edmonton, born and raised, probably die. Just anything that catches my attention, I want to poke at and prod at and figure out how it works and hopefully make it safer.
And I think that's an important thing. Like people have this notion of like hackers as like evil people out to, to steal things or whatever else. But a lot of people are interested in checking security just to make sure that it's actually secure.
Yeah, right? I mean, we can make careers out of this. I'm a penetration tester by trade, so I get paid to break into stuff. I am living the dream of every kid that ever played cops and robbers. I get to be the robber. I get the get out of jail free card.
Yeah, a lot of writing of reports. I have the signed permission that says that I'm allowed to break in here. So, good job catching me, but you got to let me go now. Yeah. It's so this is an important field because one of the problems that happens is there's a lot of things that are touted as high security, but really aren't once it gets tested. Behind the scenes, we were talking about a gun safe that there's one that Lockpicking Lawyer did a video on that was comically bad because it had a panel you could take out and just remove the gun without actually opening it. These kinds of problems.
Facepalm doesn't begin to describe some of the things that Lockpicking Lawyer's channel is brilliant. But yeah, there's so many products out there that are touted as being secure, but really aren't, or they'll meet a legal requirement for things, but they'll do the bare minimum. You run into that with a lot of the gun containers and gun locks, where they are a lock, but the TSA lock on your luggage is probably more secure. They're just comically bad because they don't have to be any better because they don't specify that it has to be a certain quality, or pins or anything like that.
And this gets to be a real problem with things that we expect to be secure, especially things like vehicles, which is the topic at hand, because we've got a lot of issues right now with car theft. That's sort of at a there's sort of record numbers of car thefts going on. So this is something that's kind of been in the news a lot. So I guess let's talk about the Flipper Zero. They've been saying that this is something that I could use to steal a car. Is that correct?
Absolutely not. Really, the only way you could use this to steal a car is if you beat the driver with it, and the keys, and you can use that with just about anything.
Yeah, I was thinking probably the best approach would be to just try to use this to smash the window, but
Probably wouldn't
you
even be
do.
that effective as opposed to like a rock.
Yeah, I was thinking, yeah, a rock might. So, now the thing is you've got your car key fob, and it sends a signal to unlock the car, and in some cases to start the car. Why can't I use like? Well, I guess let's talk about what the Flipper Zero does. I guess first, back things up. So,
Flipper Zero is essentially on their website they tout it as a multi-tool for device for geeks. It has a bunch of different technologies embedded in it. RFID for low frequency and high frequency cards. It's got infrared on it. It'll do I button, some basic Bluetooth, and sub 1 gigahertz radio that it can receive and send on. Nothing particularly new in terms of technology. It's just they put it into a nice little package that happens to have this nice little dolphin dude on it that's like a little Tamagotchi. That responds the more you use it, they'll level up and stuff like this. So they kind of gamify things. But it's also got a bunch of ports here that you can use to interface with other hardware, expansion boards, or use it even just to debug a circuit board you're using.
yeah, I've got this this additional dev board that I can plug into it. I haven't been able to actually successfully initialize the dev board, but it's sort of an example. You can plug additional stuff into it to maybe extend its capacity a bit.
So things like the infrared, a really common thing that people would use that for is for TVs. If you lost the remote or whatever, you can program with the code for on or off or up, change the channel or what have you. If you're a bit of a jerk, guilty, you could be sitting in a bar and there's some sports ball game or whatever going on, and you can sit there and just turn that stuff off because it's annoying. But it's an infrared thing. This has been around however long TVs have had remotes. People have been able to use the same model and pull this stuff. This isn't anything new.
I was gonna say you can buy like a device that
the TV be gone.
Yeah, the TV be gone and all of that.
Cell phones have infrared and you can get apps to do that.
Yeah, I don't think mine does. I used to have a cell phone that had a little infrared.
Not common anymore, but you can actually get like USB ones to plug into the bottom.
Yeah, that was great because when you're at the bar and they've got it at like super loud noises, you're just like, let's cut the volume down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, if it can record and send signals, why can't I record my key fob signal and then replay it with this thing?
So most modern car key fobs use what they call a rolling code. Basically anything since mid-90s is this rolling code. Same with even like garage door openers. What it is that it'll send a code, and then both the car and the remote will know, okay, I've sent that, use that code, through some math, we're going to now use the next time we use this, we're expecting this code. It changes the code. Unless you know what that setting is for how it's going to change that, you don't know what the next code is going to be. So one party trick that is often shown, described with the flipper, is if you're far away from somebody's car, you have them hit the button on their fob, record it with the flipper, go out to the car, replay it, car opens. Ta-da! Except that you can't do that again. It only works once because now the code that it's expecting has changed, and you have no way of knowing what that is. You were basically recording the thing out of range, and it didn't know to roll the code because it hadn't received it yet. And with those remotes, because coins in your pocket or whatever, or keys can hit the button and activate it, there's usually a window of codes that it'll accept. It'll accept one of the next 100 or something. So if you sat there with your remote clicking all the time away from it, you might actually screw it up and make it not get out of sync. But you're expected to be there recording with the flipper while they hit the button as they're far away from the vehicle, and all that does is get you through the door. There, most vehicles since about 2000 have basically it's an RFID system. The fob and the key.
Yeah.
The lockout.
You've got to be sitting with the fob to,
Yeah.
And then you can push the button to
and
start it. Those kinds of things.
It interrogates the key, says, "Oh yes, I know this code." Does some cryptographic math, verifies that it's the actual key, and that the engine recognizes this and allows the fuel to flow and turn it over. So the key itself is just turning a switch, but the computer in the car is deciding, oh, I actually recognize this key. It's not just a screwdriver.
It's not just a random signal, somebody else's key, that kind of thing.
Right, and it has to be very close. Usually those readers are built right around the where the keyhole is, or the ignition switch is. Right. Now, those codes, again, there's some cryptographic math going on that is not, unless you know the secret, you can't predict what that code's going to be. So while I may be able to interrogate the keys chip, I'm not going to be able to talk to it because I don't have the secret code to have it give me the right response. So the flipper is not going to help you with doing anything to defeat the lockout, the interlock.
You can replay a code, but unless you actually know the code, and
well, that only applies for the doors, which would get you into the car. But again, as we've said, a rock is probably a lot more efficient.
Well, and it sounds like in order to get into the car, you basically need the cooperation of the flipper, of your victim, the owner, because they have to, for instance, push the button on this, and they have to intentionally do it from a situation where it's too far away for the car to unlock. Because if the car unlocks when they push this, then the flipper's already just recorded a code that at the same time has become useless.
Yeah.
And so you need that very specific setup in order to even open it, which means, if you've got the person who's helping, who has the fob helping you do it, I'm being careful not to show my actual keys here, but then they can just if it needs the help of the person who's authorized to get in, then they could just unlock it because they have the keys. And
it's this weird case that people have made videos of this. Other people have made stuff that is basically staged to show how to steal a car with a flipper. Trying to get clicks for likes or whatever.
On a previous stream, joking about it, I had a sequence where I was playing around with that, and it was I had something like I was playing around with it, and I rolled clip of like a nuclear missile strike.
Yeah, it's and this is a problem of misinformation out there that the politicians, policymakers, police, etc. They don't necessarily have the technical skills available to understand this. They see somebody brings them something on YouTube saying, "Oh, we need to stop this. This must be the cause of the problem," when it actually isn't. It is the opposite of the thing. It's actually a tool used by security researchers to help make things more secure by being able to test is this a secure product or not? Does it fail to these really old, basic kinds of attacks, like some of the RFID stuff this thing's capable of. It can read older types of cards. There are various attacks where you can actually need a I didn't. So, you derail my thought train. He's good at that. So you can use this to interrogate a card, and if it's one of the newer types that are encrypted, you can do there. It's able to do some things to recover some of that key. To get the whole thing, you might need to actually go to the door with the flipper and put it against the door in order to get some of the challenges from it and everything. I did it just a few weeks ago at a hotel and took probably a good 45 minutes, and I needed access to my room key and the lock, but I was able to clone it, which made it really handy backup for getting into the room. But
So that's
not the most
cloning
practical.
your hotel room key, like
Right.
with 45 minutes and the lock to do that.
Yeah.
But
it's not a case of I can just walk up to a door and magic of television magic of beep and it's not the skeleton key of old kind of situation.
I was gonna say there's a faster way to get a clone of your room key if you've already got the room key, which is you go down to the front desk and you say, "Can I get another one of these?"
Or my favorite is the scene from Sneakers where they've got the push button lock and he asks, anybody know how to defeat this? And he's like, just kicks the door in. Sometimes old school works. But it's also a case where these hotels will have 5, 10, 50, 20-year-old technology that they haven't upgraded yet.
Right.
That's danger. And the problem is that these hotels are trying to use all the life they can out of these things. And it just puts the guests at a risk. So rather than blame the product, blame the hotel for keeping around really crappy security.
I was thinking of doing a video at one point about just how easy it is for instance, like an Airbnb lock to be rigged so that the next person can just thinks that they've got a secure lock, but actually the door is terribly vulnerable. Like these kinds. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem.
Fully engaging.
Yeah, if we rely on all of these, if these technologies to keep us safe, we need to be able to check their work, right?
Or professionals need to be able to check their work. And it's white and orange case and everything, and it's got a dolphin on it and everything. This is actually a useful tool. I have on my desk here. I've got here's a Hack RF, software defined radio that can actually do some of the functions of the flipper. I've got RFID cloner, for a specific model. I've got a radio scanner. Like the flipper basically just takes all of these things and kind of just crams them together, which is what technology tends to do. And so if you're banning the flipper, well, you might as well ban all this other stuff. Oh, if you want to ban anything that's able to read and emulate certain RFID cards, like credit cards, well, then you have to ban Android phones. You can do that. It's a problem with the policymakers not understanding what they're doing. It becomes this bit of performative action where they're banning the brand name product that is got the fancy case and everything like that versus something somebody orders on the dark web out of China that's built into a Bluetooth speaker or something to hide it, and actually its only use is to do to move cars.
That's sort of something that is worth talking about. There are tools that people use to steal cars nowadays, but they're not the flipper.
No,
and
they are purpose built to take advantage of vulnerabilities found in modern vehicles. Because modern vehicles are basically rolling computers. It used to be the old hot wire thing where the guy rips open the column, grabs two wires, rubs them together, and the car magically starts. You've got the ignition interlocks and stuff. And I think a lot of where the problem is that people are seeing a lot more cars being stolen because of TikTok. Talk about that. There was kids that had a video showing, because I believe it was 2008 to 2018. Correct me if I'm wrong. Kias and Hyundais, to save a few bucks, they took out the interlock So it was now just old school key that you shove in and it turns a switch. Well, what these people on TikTok found out was, well, you get into the car, again, smashy, shove a screwdriver into the column or by the ignition switch, rip it open, a USB cable, just a standard, USB-A cable will fit the little nub from the ignition switch to be able to turn it over, and you can drive away the car, because they had removed this security device that had been very effective in reducing car theft, because they wanted to save a few bucks. I've actually not run any of the numbers or anything, but I would be very curious if you took the Kias and Hyundais out of the data, how much of a rise there actually is. I think that is sort of casting a false light on how big the problem is, because you've got a bunch of, if your car, you're a car manufacturer and it is failing, being stolen regularly by teenagers because of a video on TikTok, you failed. Like,
yeah, that's
like, if your product is vulnerable to a flipper zero, you have a terrible product.
one of the things I had people like. I've likened this to something like a bent wire, in the sense that you might have a door lock that somebody can bypass with a bent wire. If you watch Lockpicking Lawyer, there's plenty of here's a fancy gun safe where
Show a
he
bobby
slaps
pin
a,
in this thing and doink, and it opens. And
or he slaps a magnet on the side and the solenoid pops. We shouldn't ban magnets or bent wires, because really the whole point of those illustrations isn't look at the magical power of a magnet. It's look at how poor the security system is on this. And if this can break your security, it is god awful. Like, this is the tech equivalent of the bent piece of wire, basically, is sort of how I see it. It's I mean, there are attacks that are used, but they're not flipper attacks.
The one that I am actually rather impressed with is, like I said, these cars are rolling computers now. Your headlights aren't actually controlled by a switch anymore. It is a button that sends a command to a microcontroller that talks to another microcontroller over a protocol called CAN bus to then activate the light and everything. And that's what allows it to do all sorts of tie in with the steering, so it knows to turn the light or do the weird direction indicators and stuff like that. There was a case where someone's car kept getting stolen, but they were getting actual telemetry from it through the mobile app for their car. The fact that cars have apps now is still astounding me. They had this app, and it was able to get some diagnostic data, and they kept every time this thing got stolen, they found that the headlights were the first thing to show as an error condition. What it turns out was that they were ripping open the headlight to get access to the wires, because they're not just electrical, that's data lines. That gave them access to essentially the onboard computer of the car to take control of it, because the computer assumed the only way you'd be interfacing it is with the keys in your fob and everything like that, not plugging in directly to it and then adding your own key to it or giving it other commands to bypass things. David Beckham lost a number of Mercedes, was it Land Rovers, one of the two, from a parking garage where he lived. And it was what these guys were doing was they would get into the parkade, not hard, and pop the hood. And if you know that piece of wire, it can reach in and pull a latch. They were actually plugging into the diagnostic port on the vehicle and adding their own key to the key ring and to the computer to say, because you can get the fobs aftermarket easy enough. You just had to tell the car to recognize this one that you had. It took about 15 minutes, but you're in a private parkade at 3 a.m. It's going to be around, and that's how they're able to steal these $100,000 vehicles, because the trust boundary was, oh, well, they shouldn't be able to open the hood. If you can open the hood, and that's game over. Well, why am I buying $100,000 vehicle?
And this is kind of the problem, is like once somebody could get at the headlight and that control wire, they could use that with other equipment to send a signal telling the car doors to open, which is, and when you think about this is a bizarre design, right? Why should the headlight be able to tell the car doors what to do?
And this, therein lies a larger discussion about things like, cars, of like, why does the infotainment system in my vehicle need to be able to talk to my brakes? Like, this is scary. I mean, I understand from the designer standpoint. Like I said, it allows them to do all sorts of interesting stuff with, as you're turning, your headlights can turn and follow the curve. It needs to know, what angle your steering wheel's at, do all sorts of other things. But it's the fact that their model was assuming the car's integrity would never be compromised.
Right.
They weren't realizing that there was a potential for somebody to like get in at those wires, or like I said, open the hood and plug into the diagnostic port. And therein lies the thing is this is an industry that is fairly new to this whole thing.
I guess we could draw an analogy to like a bank where, they don't let you as a random member of the public go into the back room, like into the back but even once you go into the back, they have security procedures back there so that like if I go through the door marked employees only, they're going to say you're not wearing a uniform, you don't have a tag, you're going to encounter other locks, and they're not just going to, whereas the car, because it only has that one level of security, essentially once you get past that like employees only door, essentially is like, okay, you've made it past that, you're now allowed into the vault.
Yeah, and it's you end up with these situations where it's depending on the procedures, it could be, well, you need to show ID. Okay, here's my gun license or political party membership or something that's not like a bank ID. The procedures say you have to show ID. It doesn't mean it has to be yours. It doesn't have to mean it has to be the bank's, a bank issued one. So this is the sort of thought process that people in my industry go through, where it's well, I met your requirements. You said I had to show ID. I showed ID. You let me in. That's a problem. So with vehicles, they're assuming that if you're in the seat and presenting the right codes and everything like that, you must be the authorized driver. Therefore, I'm going to let you drive.
Yeah, and I mean the CAN bus attacks are kind of terrifying for a car owner, because really the only way to prevent that is to keep somebody from getting like physically near your car. And
yeah,
I mean, you're going to park your car in parkades. You're going to park your car on the street. You're going to. So the fact that there's anything that you can buy technology for, somebody can make the technology for, right?
Yeah. Well, the car industry, the vehicle industry is actually very interesting, because when you think about it, whatever they're working on, they've got whatever they're working on for release 5 years from now is sitting on a bench now. They're able to they have to design things now because it's going to take a while to produce and everything. When the researchers, Charlie Miller and some others did research 2016, 18, somewhere around there, they were able to come in over cell network, talk to a Jeep Cherokee that was being driven by a reporter, and essentially kill the engine and make, basically disable the vehicle.
Right.
There was even attacks a few years before that where it was, well, if we get access to the CAN bus, we can do all sorts of nasty things, make the brakes stop working. The industry was like, well, that means you have to have physical access to the vehicle while it's in motion. That's not going to happen. But they knew that in like 5 years, what they were designing was going to be online. It's going to be connected to the cell network. So why weren't they taking the lessons from at that point and saying, oh, well, maybe we need to consider this going forward rather than always being perpetually 5 years late? Or
yeah, they really need to do is hire people who are like you, or at the design stage.
yeah, and there are companies that have practices specifically dealing with this that have people on staff that know about Canvas and all this knowledge, but it takes company still has to come out to and hire these people to do this sort of research or educate themselves. There's a car hacking village at DEF CON. They actually have vehicles there where they're allowed to tinker and learn this stuff. It is not difficult to learn about these attacks and generally see sort of where the progression of things are going to be going, and see where the attacks are coming from, and maybe consider things like, well, it may be convenient for you to design. Maybe I shouldn't be able to adjust my brakes from the cell network. Like, why is my infotainment system talking to my brakes, or why can it unlock my trunk or other things? If you don't make that functionality even possible, then you don't have to worry about it.
And the other thing I will note is that that is a big factor, is convenience, right? You don't have to. It's really easiest if you've got like that high trust internal system where everything allows you to do anything. But once you get somebody messing with the system who's not like a trusted person, then everything goes to hell.
Yeah,
and
they're slowly learning, but then you get things like Hyundai and Kia deciding, oh, we'll just remove the immobilizer because these are the cheap cars, and we want to save a few bucks and get to that certain price point, and that's blown up in their face. But it's also interesting just some of the things in North America versus the rest of the world. Like if you look at most a lot of European vehicles, there's no keyhole on the passenger side of the vehicle.
Right.
Because they want you standing out in traffic where you're going to be seen to unlock the vehicle. It's not that you can be off in the shadows on the sidewalk, tinkering with things. Just stupid little things like that. Certain countries actually like grade, the police will grade locks to say this is a good lock, this is a bad lock. So certain things like, as we were saying with the gun locks, they could say, oh, you need a lock on here that is, whatever police grade 2 or whatever number of that's acceptable. And that I think is the thing is we're letting the industry self-regulate too much. And so they are choosing the cheapest methods. And they're also the ones that have the ears of the policymakers to say, hey, all our cars keep getting stolen. You guys need to do more. Well, what can we do? Other than, actually like fixing the problem. It's, well, let's ban something that is completely ineffective, or is such a multi-tool that it's like banning hammers because you could, assault someone with it. But you can also build a house with it.
And I mean, the other thing is, when I said that I was looking, I was like, I'm going to buy a flipper because they're about to ban it. I got so many messages from people going, don't buy a flipper because you can make one with like the following list of parts. Here's the list of parts.
Basic radio that's in a ton of different things.
Yeah.
Hack RF. There's literally nothing to stop you from, because it's open source too. I mean, the hardware design, the software is. So as soon as you ban it, somebody's going to just re-implement it on something else, call it, Flipper 2 or whatever. And though I can think of a few other names that would be more appropriate. But it's this cat and mouse game, and it's Is it designed for stealing cars? Well, no, but is a hammer designed to kill? Not necessarily. It's the multi-use problem, that you run into everything.
Well, and doing criminal defense, I've seen like guys get arrested in a car like that is not their car. They get like, and perhaps somebody's got like a low jacked car or something, so it gets they catch the people in it and they find like the tools they were using. I've never seen a flipper as the tool.
Right.
I've seen like they've got some cobbled together thing that, let's be honest, the guys who are stealing the cars, they didn't probably make it. They bought it from somebody who's selling them to meth heads, but they're making them out of like Raspberry Pis and whatever else.
Yeah,
or
commodity stuff that is, and I mean, that's the point of a personal computer, is it's able to do a whole bunch of different things, as opposed to like an ASIC or something that's only does one thing and does it very well, versus a general computing platform.
Yeah, stolen laptop that they can hook into the CAN bus. I mean, the number one tool for breaking into cars has always been a screwdriver.
Yeah,
and it'll continue to.
The immobilizers, when they start putting those in late 90s, early 2000s, the car theft dropped dramatically. I mean, it may have spiked in older cars, but once those were kind of cycled through and off the road, car theft went down. But now, the attackers have caught up. They understand these systems now. They're able to just go on the dark web, order, a kit.
Yeah.
You too could become a car thief. It doesn't involve a flipper. So it's this, you're banning the wrong thing. And by putting all your efforts into that, you're actually making the problem worse by not going after the real specific tools that are being used for this.
Well, and the other really common one is, you've got that little key fob where the car starts once you sit in it, right? Those ones.
How many people have those sitting, right beside on just the other side of the door in their garage, that's within like a few feet of the vehicle? So if I get in your garage, the thing's already primed. Let me turn it over.
It's not even getting in the garage. It's somebody hangs it up next to the door, like on a rack by the door, or they put it in a bowl by the door.
Yep.
And what the criminals have been doing is a thing that reads that, beams the signal over to a second unit, and then the car can start up and it won't shut down if it loses that signal, because they don't want you losing signal on the highway.
Yeah, it'll freak out at you a bit, but it's able to drive it to wherever they're gonna deal with.
They'll drive it to their like shop, and then their shop, they'll have acquired the equipment to like rekey the thing, and that'll be dealer equipment, which the dealer equipment
or copied.
Well, let's be honest, a lot of the sources of the dealer equipment is dealers who are like, okay, I'll take some money for that.
Or a car manufacturer that doesn't do their due diligence in verifying that, yes, this is actually a car dealer that's ordering this.
Yeah. Hello, I am running the whatever dealership out of PO box whatever.
Yeah.
So,
but the solution should be to off some of the sources for these things. I mean, it's a whack-a-mole game. You're never going to stop it completely. If you go after the actual, like those relay devices, there's very little legit use for those, other than specifically for stealing cars. But they're not like a multi-purpose device that a security researcher could use. If you needed such a thing for security research, you could make something out of other stuff very easily. But
and the thing is, though, that
those wouldn't be very easily portable and user-friendly for your Joe criminal on the street.
But the thing is like, if you can make something like a relay device and it just works reliably to steal the cars, what they should be doing is redesigning the security systems so that doesn't work.
But that costs money.
Nobody
likes to spending that.
But I mean, this is the problem: is we're putting we're putting our focus on the wrong things. And if your house door lock could be defeated by any idiot with a pocket knife who just walks up and sticks a pocket knife in the key, the keyway, and turns it.
You'd be surprised how many there are.
But we would say this is, that this is a terrible lock and that this lock shouldn't be used. But, why don't we say the manufacturers should have some requirement to ensure that these simple tools don't work?
When UK, Australia, and even the US are putting in laws for things, IoT gadgets, anything connects to the internet, things like must be updatable. They must not have a default passcode or anything set up. It's the first time you fire it up, you have to enter one.
Right.
Like we don't necessarily have that sort of situation for vehicles. That sort of here's what not to do. And yeah, you might be, find a loophole or something like that, but that goes against the spirit of the thing, and that you shouldn't be doing that. It's the people don't like getting their cars stolen. I mean, I'm sure they like it because then they get to sell another one. But the problems that it creates, in terms of funding crime and everything else, it's not worth it. We need everybody playing nice and playing together on that. And part of it needs to be that the politicians need to start listening to people who are this is our lives, our jobs. We're the subject matter experts in this. Maybe reply to emails from constituents that have concerns. They're offering services to teach you about this stuff.
I mean, I just got an alarm system installed, and the first thing the alarm guy did was like, "Hey, you got to set a code. I'm not going to watch the code, but you've got to set a code."
Yeah. As opposed to the way it used to be, where they would just say, "Okay, well, the code is 1, 2, 3, 4." A lot of people really set it to 1, 2, 3, 4, anyways. But
yeah, I mean, you can't stop people from setting. I mean, maybe you can. Setting bad combinations. I mean, you can to a certain extent. You can say the code's got to be, whatever.
1, 2, 3, 4 is banned plus, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2.
Yeah, the problem is they'll say you need a symbol, a letter, and at least X long, and people will put password 1 exclamation mark. And
it's scary that still counts as a security device, meaning any if you type username, password, admin, and you get in, now you've crossed the line and become a criminal, despite the fact that there's no earthly reason that should have worked.
Yeah. It's so, I mean, this is frustrating that we've got a government that is announcing that they're saying we're doing something, and this is not, banning this isn't going to help.
I'm sure in their minds, all deference to them, I'm sure in their minds, they're busy. Some one of their aides searched YouTube, found a video of somebody that staged something to get clicks of using a flipper to steal a car, and show it to them, and it's that's all the evidence they needed, rather than actually doing research, talking to people like myself that are aware of these things far more than they are, because this is our livelihood. They can provide sort of sane advice and direction. I'm not saying car theft isn't a problem, but it's the to reduce it down to, if we ban these, that will solve it. That's stupid. They'll just repackage it in something else, and it'll still be available on the dark web. Bad guys will still get them. You've just now hobbled security researchers from doing their thing, which is trying to make things better.
Yeah, it seems to me that the solution is more to put liability or responsibility on the car manufacturers, and to just, I mean, amongst other things, you could say, hey, if you have an unfixed vulnerability that exists, then you got to do a recall, or you're going to be on the hook for all of these stolen cars. Like if you're Kia and it's possible to start your car with a USB, after you pry it open, then that's on you, Kia. It shouldn't be on the drivers. It shouldn't be on, it should be on Kia, because Kia is the people who could have not done that.
I mean, how much does it cost them to send out, apparently there's some software updates on some of them, but they were just sending out like old school, steering wheel locks as a deterrent. And it's like, how much is that costing you now? They play the game of, well, if we don't get caught, then it's cheaper. So they run risks. I just think we need to bring back the public pillory, lock some of these CEOs in the town square, and offset the cost by selling them rotten vegetables. Because it's just, we need to bring some shame to these companies that do egregiously stupid things. I mean, sometimes things happen. It's like you couldn't have foreseen that, but sometimes it's like, well, no, you removed the security devices from these Kias and Hyundais. What did you think was going to happen?
And I think Canada actually requires the. I don't know that Canada's Kias had the same problem, because I think they require the interlock here. I could be wrong on that.
Double check, but I know that that whole problem has been a big thing here as well, and it's again, it's even if they're not doing it here, it's still in the States, and that affects the insurance industry.
The other thing that's really bizarre, like when I was a kid, my parents had like a Volkswagen Rabbit, this really old, and it had a secret switch hidden in it, or at least the one that we were driving, that interrupted the engine.
Yeah, it killed the power to the fuel pump. That was an old hot rodder trick.
And I'm actually starting to see that come back, where people, because of the relay attacks and the CAN bus attacks and so forth, they're installing these kinds of hidden switches, and it's actually in some cases working, because you've got people like literally meth addicts who are like using stuff that's given to them by more sophisticated criminals. Like the guys who are running the car theft rings are sophisticated. The guys who actually deliver the cars to them might be just like low end people who get like handed something and said, go use this to steal cars. Those people might not figure out the hidden switch. And,
I know I saw in the comments a lot earlier that probably your best security device is a stick shift.
Yes and no, because what I've seen a lot of is I've seen circumstances where people have absolutely shredded the transmission trying to get a stick shift going.
Yeah, but then you find it like 3 blocks later.
Yeah, but you may be kind of trashed. You want to control car companies because of the actions of criminals? We already do. Like, we already require car manufacturers, for instance, aren't allowed to make a car that just has a push button start with no security features.
You still have to have the fob present within proximity.
You got to have something. And Saxus, who's been sort of trollish in the chat, says usually you find a stolen car either way. Not necessarily. Like
a lot of these high-end ones, as somebody else in the comments posted, they're driven immediately to a rail yard or a port and put in a shipping container.
Yep. And that's the thing, is a lot of you're always going to have the car theft that is like somebody steals a car because they want to drive around it. Somebody steals the car because they want to, whatever else. They they want to go for a joyride or whatever. But the sophisticated car thieves they drive it to a specific location where it's going to get modified, to, they may rekey it, or they may just load it into a container ship and send it overseas to get rekeyed, or it gets chopped up. These are sophisticated plans, and we already do. That's your criteria. I guess gun control is okay. First of all, don't put words in my mouth. If I meant to say something, I just said it. Second of all, like when we're talking about product liability, that's a different category entirely. We do actually expect gun manufacturers, for instance, to not make a gun that goes off without you pulling the trigger. And that's really what we're talking about here, right? Is the equivalent of, we're saying that if you're selling a product and you're telling people that it's got a lock, the lock should actually not be dog shit. You should actually be delivering what you're promising in terms of security. And so that's where the product liability comes, that says, and this isn't a contract, we have product liability on everything. Like your computer, it's got to actually run when they sell it to you. It's got all of these things. So we do actually
not burn your house down, which is why we have underwriters labs and electrical codes and standards and things like that. So,
and I mean, underwriters lab is because you were talking about these, like having the police check things out, but like underwriters laboratory is pretty much the only people who seem to actually do any investigation of safes and so forth. But their investigations aren't super useful to the average person. Because for most people, what you buy, like if you buy a UL, like a safe with a UL rating, it might be like UL 10 for like tools and UL 0 for everything else.
Yeah, it's okay, if somebody's got a hammer, yeah, this will keep somebody out for a couple hours, and hopefully you'll notice. That's why you have a security guard go by periodically, to look for this. But it's like if they brought a plasma cutter, okay, that's a whole different game. This isn't rated for that. You better not be putting something in there that is valuable enough that somebody's going to look a plasma cutter to the safe.
Yeah, I mean, I just bought a big heavy safe with walls that are like that, and I can say like the time to get into that for somebody who's going at it with a crowbar, hopefully is going to be a while. But with a plasma cutter, it's going to be minutes.
Thermal lance or something. It's
or explosives.
And I mean,
like I'm sure the explosives rating is 0.
I believe it was Norway. I think Germany might also do it, where the police essentially rate locks. One could quibble about the criteria that they use, but they'll say, okay, this is a grade 1, 2, 3 lock. If you put grade 3 in your locks in your doors of your house, well, your insurance company be like, oh, you actually picked a good lock. It's recognized by the cops. We're gonna give you a discount. So there's that carrot and stick situation. Yeah, you can still use a crap lock, but you're gonna pay more for your insurance. In this case, with the automotive companies, it's the case of, well, we say you have to have a lock, you have to have an interlock, but maybe it shouldn't be, as Runkle said, dog shit. It shouldn't be something that can be defeated by a flipper 0. It's like this should now be in your design considerations of have your line item in your design is like, can this be defeated by a flipper 0? No. Good. Okay, now we need to keep going.
Yeah, Deviant mentioning the best safe rating ever is TXTL 60, almost none ever made, which max out at 60 minutes of attack time. Most consumer safes are nowhere near that and have no resistance to torches. Deviant, I actually sent you a picture at one point of my safe, and I don't know if it's even UL rated. I'll have to look and see if it's got but like a big wall like that, and I'm like, how long is that actually going to hold somebody off?
The thick walls are probably more to keep fire and heat.
Yeah,
that's the purpose. It's not necessarily a security thing. It's a thermal barrier.
Yeah, I mean, it might help with somebody. I've seen situations where safes have, for instance, been carved open with like a hunting knife. People thought it was a secure safe, and they yarded out of whatever, and then getting at the back, have been able to carve into it.
The sheer number of hotel safes that I've come across that aren't even bolted down. You just pick up the whole safe and walk out with it.
Oh yeah, and people do, right? People,
But that's the thing, is it's like, oh, you have a safe, great. I'm gonna put all my important stuff in there. Yeah, but if it's not bolted down, then that's not very effective.
yeah, it's, all of these things. Maybe this is the solution. Is maybe we could have like the vehicle, like the car insurers go like, hey, we're not going to insure Kias anymore against theft.
That is actually becoming a big problem. Is a lot of people with those cars, insurance companies are like, nope.
And maybe the insurance companies might be interested, for instance, in security researchers getting these cars and giving it a rating and being like, hey, we think that this thing is rated at, at this level. And then so that people, before they buy it, the insurance companies can be like, you don't want the following, makes and models.
Yeah. And I mean, there's always the lists of, the most, essentially that's already happening. And that's actually by the car thieves. The most stolen cars lists you see each year. It's like, okay, maybe you don't buy those.
Yeah, it's just, I feel like it needs to, I feel like it's sort of not enough knowledge of this. Like, people discover that they're like, a lot of people are still like, they buy a Kia and they don't realize it. I don't know what the good solution is, but it's certainly not banning the flipper.
It was, like I said, I believe up till 2018 model year. And this whole TikTok thing came out a little bit after that. So it was, the damage was already done. People already owned those vehicles with the vulnerability. But all the new stuff, as I said, I recall there was a case where people were drilling a hole in a very specific location by a tail light, again, to be able to reach in, fish out a wire to get at the CAN bus. And it's the fact that it's all plain text protocol, that there's not necessarily any encryption or authentication going on, because it assumes if you're on the wire, you are another electronic control unit in the vehicle and able to issue commands.
And so I guess maybe for the people in chat, because we've got people in chat who are a tremendous range of sort of experience here. So plain text versus encryption is like, plain text is just text, like you'd find in a book, right? It's just everything is as it's supposed to be. Whereas encryption is encoded such that it can't, even if you read the signal along the way, you don't know what the content is. You don't know what it's about. And that, I think, is, this is sort of part of what they call like zero trust computing, where the headlight shouldn't be trusted by the engine. It shouldn't be like, oh yeah, you're the headlight.
It should need to prove that it is actually the headlight and not somebody else. It's
yeah.
Zero trust is basically where everything you interact with, you have to authenticate and get authorized for. Where it's okay, everything is a discrete unit in the vehicle. That, again, it's the infotainment system only needs to talk to XYZ. It's only going to be authorized to talk to those. I don't need it to talk to the brakes or be able to adjust the mirrors or anything like that. So I'm not going to let it, even though it's on the same network. It's just, if it sees a command from the infotainment unit, it's going to say, yeah, you're not authorized. I'm going to ignore you.
Yeah. Headlight is trying to control the door locks. The headlight's got no business doing anything with the door locks. It's disallowed, right? Those kinds of things. Or, but also just things like the headlight wants to tell the steering wheel what's going on or something like that. Can you prove you're actually a headlight? Is this actually a headlight signal or is this some other? And, there's a good point here about it makes repairability much harder, and it might, for instance, mess with third-party parts.
The there's already a problem with all these systems and all the sensors that we're putting in modern vehicles. Like I'm building a hot rod myself, 1971 Dodge Demon.
Oh, cool.
There's no computerization in that. But the modern car, like if you wang your side mirror or something like that, well, there's the lane departure sensors or the car next to you sensors. That mirror that used to be like $20 to replace can now be like literally thousands of dollars because there's so much technology in those. It means a lot more could go wrong. I live in Edmonton, and we were the coldest place on the planet back in middle of January. Or a warm day on Mars. Yeah, a lot of things stopped working properly in that. And it's like,
well,
the old cars probably would have actually worked a lot better in certain circumstances, as opposed to a really finicky little piece of silicon that hadn't expected minus 56.
Yeah, I mean, and I see the thing about maybe I want my headlights to turn on when I open my door. Sure. That's a signal from the door to the headlights.
And we can also do that just purely electrically.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily need to be.
We make things overly complicated too often, I think, just for the sake of development.
Yeah, I mean, that could just be a wire with like my, I used to drive like a Mazda 323. It was a very basic car. It had that function, even though it wasn't like heavily computerized. That function was just, there's a little button that the door actually physically pushed, and that messed with the headlights because that's real simple. I mean, there's also real concerns here in that, most of these attackers are people who are motivated by profit. Like they want to steal a car. But, you get security researchers who want to consider things that are, that are also like malicious attacks. Like if you're on the highway, can we disable your brakes? Can we floor the gas, remotely? Could you do this if you had like advanced access to the headlights? You don't have high level access, but you could get access to somebody's headlights, for 2 minutes, just at the parkade. Can I slap something into the car that's going to make it go berserk and slam you into a wall? These kinds of things are also worthwhile questions because eventually somebody's going to try a homicide in these kinds of fashions.
In the comments there, they say, open the door, the lights come on. My dumb fridge has that function.
Yes.
This doesn't need to be overly complicated. And I mean, the designers, sometimes it's commodity, that it's just easier to have these things talk to each other this way or what have you. But I always like to point out that, whenever you see like a Mad Max movie or anything like that, it's not the highly technical cars that are still running. It's the old V8, purely analog.
And I mean, it's really simple if everything is wired together, but there was an attack.
Have to be. Like I said, the infotainment system should not ever be on the same, like even on a CAN bus network, talking, have a path to talk to my brakes. Like if you make sure that isn't even connected, you're gonna be safer for it because then you don't have to protect it.
Wasn't there a casino attack where they hacked like a fish tank?
Yep, it was a monitor for a fish tank in one of the casinos in Vegas, one of the big lobby ones with all the expensive fish that happened to be online, so they could monitor salinity or temperatures and like that. But it was on the network. It had a vulnerability. They were able to get in through that into the casino systems.
And this illustrates the problem. The fish tank shouldn't be able to get you to.
Why is the fish tank talking to slot machines?
Yeah. This is kind of the problem that you get to is the, it's like, why is this sort of universally controllable when it doesn't need to be? They should be planning for this kind of security, and they're not. and that's what worries me.
Yeah, there's a balance that in a lot of IoT and other products nowadays where it's the just because we can doesn't mean you should kind of situation where, yeah, it's cool if you could do all this stuff, but unless you could do it right, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. You should make sure that, okay, yeah, you could do some of the nice things with the sensors and adjusting the headlights and that, but again, it's the consider the situations that could happen in the future. Like you say, if somebody's able to turn off your brakes from your infotainment system, why the hell was that connection even there in the first place? Not considering they're creating these new amazing products, but not realizing that people are terrible and going to try to steal them or abuse them in various ways.
Well, the classic example also is baby monitors and baby, because people buy little cameras to watch their kids, right? Because it's like, hey, if the kid is making a noise and I'm watching a show, I want to be able to just log in and see that the kid's okay.
The problem too is that with this push to the cloud, and cars are guilty of this too, because they're connected and always on. Tesla's hell, they're always on, connected to the internet. It's where, why am I having to connect to the cloud in order to talk to a thing that's 3 feet from me? And you end up with situations like, I think it was the early Nest or Ring thermostats, where if the internet went out, you couldn't turn your heat on. This is stupid. We had I was having a discussion with my wife. She was looking at a new stove, and there was this Samsung thing, and I noted it was a smart stove. It had Wi-Fi, and you could control it from anywhere in the world. Why the hell would you want to do that? It was funny. I'm like, I looked at it a little more, and it was like, wow, you can turn on the oven, set the temperature. Oh, but you still have to walk over to it and push the button to actually have it start heating up. But you can set the temperature and everything from anywhere in the world, but you still have to physically go to the thing. And it's like, why did you connect that? Why?
I mean, I could see at least. I could see the usefulness for doing that within your own, network. It might be really convenient for me to be able to adjust the oven to be like, I'm turning down the temperature right now from right here. But
or a push notification saying, hey, your timer's done. Something like that on a washing machine or a dryer. But that's not you controlling it. It's I mean, just receiving a message from it.
When you were talking about the oven, I was thinking sometimes you just don't have enough space. So my wife or I will put stuff into the oven to just let it dry and get it out of the way. And if somebody could turn that oven on from, I don't know, Arkansas, maybe I don't want that plastic.
I was reading today, a camera manufacturer screwed up something, and you could end up logging in and seeing somebody else's cameras completely. So it's like, what happens if by pure accident somebody else's stove is now connected to their account, and they're turning it on, and they think they're turning on the one in their kitchen when it's halfway around the world.
Yeah, it's like,
and that happens literally.
I'm trying to get my oven to turn on, and instead I'm burning down somebody else's house. Meanwhile, you're sitting at home. I mean,
the future is here, and the future is stupid.
Well, I like the old line about somebody who's a little into technology is like, I've got a smart house, and meanwhile, the computer engineer is like, everything is a dumb system, and I keep a gun by the toaster in case it gets ideas.
Yeah. Well, it's like, for me, I've resisted a lot of the smart stuff, but recently gotten into it. But I'm looking at it from, there should always be an analog control, using the smart light bulbs and everything like that. There's the switch you mount on the wall and everything. But it's, if that whole thing fails, I just turn the main light switch off and then back on, and everything comes back on like a normal light bulb. Still a physical switch I can use. Situations where Amazon data centers go down and people couldn't turn on the little lights, or their vacuum cleaner wouldn't work. because Amazon's down, you can't vacuum. Like,
the other one that terrifies me is like I was trying to get a remote, like a remote doorbell with a camera, and that's just because I don't really like opening my door.
it's also really handy, particularly for deliveries where they don't ring the damn bell.
Yeah, I mean, you could see that. You could get a recording if somebody's stealing your packages, you know, all of these things. But I want one that I know is secure, where I'm in control of the data. And it's really hard to find them because you see things like Amazon being willing to turn over ring data to the cops without you being in the loop. And maybe I don't want to turn that over to the cops. Maybe I want to, you know, the cops are like, hey, we think there's been a burglary in the area. We want everybody's cameras. And I'm like, no.
Well, if they ask, that's one thing, versus it just being given over that's a whole separate thing. I mean, we've had a few situations in our neighborhood where, you know, some guys going on pulling on door handles to see if anybody left their car open and looking for loose change or whatever. You know, and dude, I had a couple of cameras on my driveway. And he came to our car and tried it, and it's like, dude didn't even like notice there was two cameras pointed at him. But it's like, okay, yeah, this guy's being a problem. Let's talk to the cops and turn that over. But it's the I get the choice. You know, the data is all stored locally. There's not cloud integration. If I want to view it remotely, I just VPN in home. You know, it's very possible, very easy to do for somebody who's into the technology. The problem is that we have made things so easy for the average consumer. I tend to liken it to like a monkey with a machine gun. You know, we put this incredibly powerful tool into the hands of something that is not capable of understanding what they are doing with it, and they end up doing something incredibly dangerous with it.
Yeah, and a lot of the problems come about from poor security. Baby monitors that just broadcast to the internet without any sort of authentication or encryption or anything like that. You know, all of these things where it's just like, you know, and you get companies who say like, why? And, you know, why would we bother having security? Which I guess
who would hack us?
Well, this ties into your Internet of Dongs project, because a lot of people were like, why would anyone hack a sex toy?
It was very interesting for me. So to circle back a little bit, the Internet of Dongs project is something I started in 2016. There is a generation of internet-connected sex toys that allow for remote control as well as integration with like streaming video, like video chat, audio, and text. You know, the usual thing of any new technology will probably find a way to be used for sex. So the interesting part is this industry, because you know anything adult is usually maligned in a lot of places. They develop these products and put them on the market, and literally did not know what they didn't know. They did not realize they are now software companies. Previously, they had just been selling a widget. You know, put it in the box, you sell it. After it's out the door, you don't have to deal with it anymore. Now, you have to maintain infrastructure. You have to deal with accounts. You have to deal with authentication, authorization. They didn't realize this. They don't go to the conferences I do. They don't have people like me around to say, do you think that's a good idea? So I don't suffer from a great deal of dignity. So I didn't mind becoming the face of this. And I started looking into this. And it was terrifying. These companies were genuinely naive. Every one of the major companies, I was able to get like find some sort of horrific vulnerability. There's ones where it's like I send a single command, it returns their entire user database to me. I can do this from any web browser. Like that kind of level is scary. And so, I mean, these companies have clued in very quickly that, and every one of them always use the magic phrase of, "Well, we care about the privacy and security of our customers." I'm like, I'm sure you do. You just have no idea how.
That's really and Were you guys involved with the?
So somebody's asking the URL for the website. It's Internet of Dawn, .gs.
I mean, a while back there was a company that made a chastity belt for guys that was intended to be you'd hand control to another partner, and they could, and there was a vulnerability in that allowed people.
So that was the QI/UI situation. Yes, I was involved in that. Another researcher reached out to me wanting to help, get some help responding to this, disclosing this to the company. We were able to do that. But basically, their API, their backend system, was horribly written. It would give you the password if you asked it nicely in certain ways for various accounts.
Please, sir, may I have the password?
Sure. Yeah. So that's a problem. But the design of this thing was that you had the app, connects to Bluetooth to the device. If to unlock it, it required it would contact the backend server, log into the account, get a key from that, bring it to your phone, and then send that to the device for unlocking. Meaning, if you couldn't connect to that server or you're locked in your account, you couldn't unlock the device. There was no manual override or backup or emergency situation.
That really seems like something that needs a.
We fought for 6 months, and there was another company actually that had also found these same vulnerabilities and been trying for even longer. We were trying for interesting you should mention that, because this company was about to also launch a shock collar that use the same infrastructure. And I'm like, and this is one of the reasons why we did a disclosure. We went public, basically saying there's a problem here. We're not going to tell you what it is, because as soon as you look, you're going to see it. And very promptly that day, somebody went through, changed all the passwords, sent emails to all the listed emails in the accounts, demanding Bitcoin in order to unlock the accounts.
Oh God!
Yeah, there was ransomware around your junk.
But there's other possibilities. If somebody's got an internet connected toy and they have a stalker, that stalker might be creepily interested in when that toy gets used.
There's been certain vendors I found where I could literally dump the history of everybody who's ever sent an invite to whoever. But it gets interesting too when if I hijack the account and I'm controlling it and I'm not the person that the user had given consent to. Is that sexual assault? Certain jurisdictions, I believe it is, because there are laws about rape by deception, where it's like if you're a twin brother or something and you sleep with a guy's wife, one of those things.
I mean, contact remotely could be considered contact. Yeah. No,
and if the person controlling it is not the person that had been given consent, it's consent under false pretenses. Other jurisdictions, there isn't any consideration for any of that. So yeah, we're talking an age of remote sexual assault. That's where this research gets really grim and scary, and why I treat it with such respect.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a funny topic, but at the same time, these kinds of security questions, and this is again, banning if somebody had a toy that I can mess with the flipper, that toy.
Technically there are, but they are incredibly old ones.
Or I mean, you might have something that's like a remote control toy that is low importance.
This one is just a simple remote and a vibrator. This one actually, played with it earlier. You can actually, with the flipper, record the signal from the remote and control this. Again, this is like RC car level of control. Yeah. It's ridiculously simple.
So this also, I guess, gets us to the question of what level of security a particular product needs. If the only feature is just vibration on or vibration off, then the most you can do to like harass or annoy somebody with it is like turn off their vibrator while they're using it, or turn it on while it's in a drawer and it.
Well,
Like,
generally, if it's
runs
in
the
a drawer, it's
batteries
probably
down.
off. But the
Yeah.
interesting part is where you start looking at the design of some of these things. If they're the app limits, how much the power to like 50% of what it's capable of, and that's the highest you can push that slider. But if I'm able to connect to it and send the raw command to go higher, and they didn't design it for that kind of power load or whatever, you could actually like start things on fire.
And
Samsung
that's a
showed
bad place. That's a bad place for fire.
Yeah, exactly. So the implications are interesting, but more I'm interested in the long distance stuff and the backend servers, like the metadata information about who has been connecting with who. I'm waiting for the first like divorce case that cites the fact that the app was connected to the device owned by his secretary or something.
I could tell you if I was a divorce lawyer, like if I was doing family law, my disclosure requests, like my requests for all of that information, would include: do you have any internet connected toys? We want the data from them. And we want a data dump.
If one of these companies gets compromised and they were keeping too much information about who's connected with who, if they were keeping it chat logs or anything, look at things like the Ashley Madison dump years ago. People were committing suicide because of that, because it was so damaging to their lives and their careers. And it's like, you may not agree with what these people are doing, but they were, it was consenting, it was legal. Did they not deserve privacy and security too? Like,
well, it could also start having national security implications.
Oh yeah.
What was it? The QE, or I forget. Like, that's a Chinese company.
Yeah, QIUI, the chastity cage.
Yeah,
I mean, vast majority of the stuff's made in China, anyways. But the infrastructure itself can be elsewhere. And it was interesting with the Ashley Madison dump. There were like .gov email addresses in there. Like, people were using their work emails to sign up.
Well, let's say you've got a guy who's just running for president, and you can reach out and be like, by the way, we have your sex toy logs. And maybe you're not going to recognize Taiwan.
Well, but that's the other thing too, and this is somewhat off topic of, well, why does that matter? Like, I mean, we're all here because people had sex, so culturally, it's a strange thing that
culturally it does is the problem, right? We could say that our culture should grow up, but we're not there yet. And you could sway an election with that. You could, so you could badly embarrass a politician, especially if like the person they were connecting to via some remote system was not their spouse. These kinds of things.
Like, people say, "Oh, I've got naked pictures of you, and use that to extort you." It's like, you got naked pictures of me? Can I have them? I want to put them on the fridge. Like, I don't care.
I actually had fun with a guy who sent me, one of those like spam emails that says like, we have naked pictures of you, etc. Do whatever, and I was like, I was just like, you should try to sell those. I was like,
yeah, it's like,
you're going to get more money trying to
fans. Yeah.
I was like, all right. I think I said basically you'll get more money threatening to release those to other people, like pay me, or I'll send these pictures to you, than you would ever get from from me.
Again, but it's weird how we were talking about automotive stuff earlier. Now we're on to sex toys, and I think we confused the crap out of a few viewers. But it goes to show that there were.
This is also significant.
Oh yes, basically it shows that the rush to connect things to the internet and to make things more complicated and bring all these new and wonderful features is sometimes not the smartest thing in the world. We run before we learn how to walk.
Yeah, I mean, when you start getting into espionage, the just little bits of interesting information, like learning how many tanks were being made based on like, like
that was an
all sorts
old
of.
Cold War thing where the price and availability of aluminum was a direct indicator of if anybody was ramping up tooling for artillery and tanks. The comment that was there was about the Stadia app for fitness trackers that
Yeah.
a lot of people would share. Hey, I did a run, and it would show a map or anything. But if you knew that person was in the service and they were stationed overseas, it would suddenly disclose where their base was. And that may not necessarily be public information, but the fact that they kept running around this same place all the time kind of says a lot. But again, it was not an intended feature, but it was what's the problem with sharing exactly where you are at any given time?
I could also see the opposite of it, where you remember how in like World War II they set up like fake bases to trick people into bombing them?
Oh yeah, I mean there was a whole division before D-Day where they had inflatable tanks and vehicles and a whole like fake army just to head fake all the spies.
I'm just
they're
imagining
still doing that in Ukraine. They're making fake like inflatable tanks and weapon systems, complete with like scattering shells and everything around it. Because these things cost like a couple of grand versus a few million. So you wasted a lot more on the artillery to take it out than you actually destroyed.
I'm just picturing, and like maybe I should write a short story about this. It's just like, okay, we're looking at bombing this base. We've confirmed that there's probably actually soldiers because we can see Fitbits moving around. Wait a minute, we're not seeing any sex toys. It's a fake. Nobody like they're faking the Fitbits, but they're not like.
Well, and there were cases where they were able to use Fitbit data to prove alibis, but as well as prove murders.
Yeah,
your Fitbit reported that you were in the proximity of the spouse that got killed. It's the fact that we have these devices now that people don't understand how they work.
I'm just really
a level of magic attributed to them.
I just think it's kind of funny that somebody decided that they needed to count their steps as they were committing a murder.
Well, it's the fact that they were wearing it all the time.
Yeah, they just don't take it off, but it's still funny
to forget it exists. They forget what it's doing, and there's a whole generation now that is so used to that are happy to share the kind of where they're going and who they're with and everything like that, not realizing that in certain circumstances that can be used against you.
Well, the other thing is that sometimes burglaries happen from people like people don't really realize this, but your buddy could have a meth addiction and you don't know it, but he needs money real bad because people get broken into by their friends. And one of the things that happens is they post on Facebook and they say, I'm going on vacation, and they get broken into while that happens.
Hollywood stars. There was the whole bling ring thing a number of years ago where there was literal teenagers that were monitoring social media for like Paris Hilton and Orlando Bloom as to them, going off to film festival overseas or whatever, and then breaking into their houses. And even one case, there was literally a key under the doormat.
But I have seen at least one where the guy he uploaded his runs every day and he went for a run at the same time. And when did they break in? The time that his buddies always knew he went for a run because he uploaded his exercise data. And so it's like
when you start thinking about things like vehicles that are always on, they have telemetry, sending diagnostic data back to the companies. If that's not properly secured, and I can tell exactly where you are, that could be very telling. One of the examples I've used in talks years ago was Twitter didn't scrub the metadata on photos that you uploaded. And Adam Savage was really big on Twitter during his Mythbuster days. Well, still is big on Twitter, or whatever they're calling it now. He posted a picture of his Land Cruiser, saying, "I'm taking my beast out to work."
Yeah.
post a picture of it, and it's like, okay, so we've got a date and time, so we know when he was leaving for work, GPS coordinates for where that photo was taken, so we now know where his house is. We know he posts through the day, so we can keep track of where he is at any given time, and know how far, that, oh, he's still like an hour away or whatever. Yeah, it was perfect storm of like something bad could happen from that, and it's because people did not understand the technology. We have added these features to make things more easy to use, more functionality, but we don't necessarily focus on the education part of it. Like if I have to get a new vehicle in the future, I'm going to have a hell of a time finding one that's not connected all the time. Basically, it's going to have to be like, okay, like where's the modem chip, and how hot can I get my soldering iron?
The other really interesting sort of aspect of all of that was just how many people revealed their location and had to deal with stalkers and so forth, because they post a picture of like, here's a selfie of me, at my house, and some stalkers like GPS coordinates.
It can get even scarier than that. There's a case with some of the IoD stuff I do. I also do some like security stuff for like cam models and that. There was an Instagram model in Japan that posted a selfie saying, at the train station, I'm almost home. There's a reflection in her eyeball in this photo that gave away a piece of unique piece of architecture in that train station. It told a stalker where that station was, and that, oh, that's near her home. That's the one that she transits through frequently. So he knew roughly what time of day. So yeah, he staked it out, followed her home, and assaulted her.
Yeah,
reflection in his eyeball.
I've seen people stalked via cam photos, via all sorts of things. One fun thing that I've seen people do is like they just take a picture that's like just a random street picture, and it's like, how long does it take people to identify exactly where that street is?
Yeah, there's OPSEC and various challenges on Twitter and other sites where it's people will do that, and it'll be somebody recognizes a particular font used by a particular restaurant in their logo or something. Just little details. It's very scary.
I actually, from one of my videos, somebody said, "Hey, this is your address." And I was like, I'm going to tell you, you're correct about where it was filmed. But what you're not correct about is that's not actually where I live. Like, I actually filmed this in an alleyway, like just away. And they were like, oh. And I was like, yeah, I wasn't filming this at my house. I was filming it some other spot. But it was like, they weren't trying to be creepy about it. They were just trying to say, like, you need to be careful about what you post, because here's how I figured out where you live. And I was like, cool. I hope nobody's stalking this random family out of nowhere. Yeah, it's tough. Like, yeah, Shia LaBeouf versus 4chan. Didn't take them long to find the flag. 4chan gets creepy when they start doing that. Yeah, but I mean, somebody was saying, what do we do to stop this? I think part of it is we talk about it and we make fun of the government, because governments are vulnerable to being made fun of. They don't like being viewed as silly.
But you also need, in my opinion, a carrot and a stick situation. You need to embarrass them and call them out on these things. But that's only half the thing. You need to actually provide answers. Like I said, I've emailed my MP, I've emailed the public safety minister about the Flipper Zero offering to educate them. I think we need to make a better communication channel to these people, instead of having have some people kind of like corral, just being able to already vetted and registered, and that can be tapped for, hey, we're looking at legislation on this, who we got that might know about this, and just like put out the call to say, hey, anybody want to get on a call and get us up to speed on this, rather than, oh, I did a YouTube search, found a BS video, and I'm going to use that as the basis for research.
Yeah, here's what you can actually do. Here's practical solutions. Yeah. What is it? Talking about lockpicking lawyer finding trackers. Trackers are becoming an issue as well.
Yeah, again, Apple came up with the AirTag. I'm willing to bet the entire team that developed that were mostly men. They did not consider that people are terrible and would abuse these. They didn't come up with, think about that and build in the precautions that they should have.
I occasionally talk to like just in terms of like let's talk about practical aspects of navigating the criminal law and so forth. Sex workers, and they've found that the AirTags are a real big problem because people give them gifts on occasion, and now they have to be super fucking paranoid about everything they get because it's like, oh, here's a purse. And it's like somebody will get them a purse that's like a $10,000 purse. And it's like, and there was an AirTag in it.
Yeah.
People are creepy, right? So,
yeah. And to that thing of it being mostly men, it's that there's a bias situation usually where a straight white cis guy probably hasn't had to deal with a lot of the problems that women have. Another example that I like to bring up is the soap dispenser problem. There was a soap dispenser, it was automatic. Put your hands under it. The company developed this thing, testing, sent it out to customers, and the customers kept coming back and saying this thing hardly ever works. Like, what's wrong with it? Well, their test group was everybody in the office. Everybody in the office was white. They never tested it with melanin skin.
Oh, geez, they never.
Their test pool was everybody was white, and of course, it worked for them, but they didn't look at the diversity and such. And
that gets
somebody else in the room to say, "Hey, that doesn't seem like a good idea." Did you consider? Is one reason that love or hate the idea of diversity. It's you get different ideas. You don't have everybody with the same experience thinking the same thing.
Yeah, it's a rough world. I mean, all of these things get to be problems. Tracking, these tracker devices sound great when it's like, oh yeah, I can find my keys, I can find my, my car if it's stolen, I can find my wallet. Not so great when it's like, the creepy guy at work can also find your house. Those kinds of things are not.
And therein lies the problem that with the vehicles and AirTags and sex toys and everything else is this rush to, hey, this is cool. Let's add connectivity and all these amazing things to this thing that really maybe shouldn't. Like saying with the stove, why does my stove need to talk to the internet? This is stupid.
Well, I guess the other thing is a lot of your, like, if you connect your phone to your car, a lot of your cars will pull a ton of information off the phone.
Your text messages, your contacts. Do you know how to delete those from your rental cars?
I don't connect my phone to the rental car.
But it's always interesting anytime I've rented a car to go through the system and see whose phones are still connected. And
oh, there's often thousands. I've actually, the last time I was renting a car, I didn't connect my phone, but I went and cleared out about like 50 phones from it because I was like, I bet these people didn't want to leave that here.
Well, a lot of the car rental places now actually have a policy to clear those out, but it's it was years before anybody actually recognized that problem, and it's like something I clocked probably 10 years ago.
but I guess the other problem, we talked about how you can get into it from like the headlight. Are you able to now, like, if you're a creepy stalker, can you go to a coworker's car and pull their text messages and their location data and all of this from that headlight connector?
I mean, usually it's a fairly destructive thing that you want to end up doing in the middle of a parking lot in the middle of the day. But again, it's like because we've added these features, things like the Bluetooth extends beyond the periphery of the vehicle. If we can, connect to it, and it doesn't have a good authentication system to where it's like I have to be in the car and being able to say, yes, I do want this to connect, and it just allows anybody to connect, like some of the early models did. Yeah, you could get in there and potentially start pulling data. Again, it's you have to design for the feature, but you also have to basically design for failure.
I mean, even just with like the fob that you sit in the car, I've always been just stunned that there isn't a feature where I can set like I'm sitting there with the fob and I also have to put in a pin. Something I have, something I know, those two things being required to make the car go. Like, why can't I set that on a car? So, these kinds of requirements.
Somebody's commented, renting a smart TV or buying used. Like the number of times I've found like TVs or video game consoles or anything with storage. Like you can find all sorts of interesting stuff in there that you probably shouldn't. Again, it's the people aren't aware of these risks until it's too late.
I mean, the other one that is becoming less common, but used to get people all the time, photocopiers.
Oh, I had a lot of fun with those back in the day.
Because a lot of, like, for the chat, a lot of people's photocopiers, they would store a record, like an image of everything you've ever recorded, like everything you've ever copied, or maybe like the last 1,000 or 10,000. At that point, like, have you ever photocopied something embarrassing?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure there's much to be gained from recovering pictures of people's butts, but
what would happen is people would like there'd be a criminal investigation and they'd pull that and they'd see like
I just want to see the fingerprinting department like get out there with the duster and everything on a bunch of people's butts.
Just a big butt imprint. If I ever write a comedy, like a crime comedy, there'll be that of like, we can get maybe we can get a fingerprint off the photocopy glass and it'll just be some butt print.
But I did some data recovery on a bunch of photocopier drives I got a hold of, and there was contracts in there. There was one of them was from a school, so there was a bunch of student data in there. It was scary, and it's that people don't realize what they're doing, and vehicles too as well record a lot of data. There is the proverbial black box that records like the last 15 20 seconds of cars before an impact, and it can show whether you braked or not, and this can be used against you, and it may there's no guarantee that information is completely accurate either.
This is the other thing that terrifies me about like dash cams. I've always thought I'd like a dash cam would be great, but I can't find a dash cam that records encrypted data. And so it's like, okay,
well, usually
I just installed a monitoring device.
SD card that encrypts it, but if you play it back on the same device, it just shows it to you unencrypted. So it's the limited utility for the encryption.
What I'm kind of thinking I need to do is get a dash cam. There's little devices that emulate an SD card, but actually just pipe to another computer, and then like build a computer in there so that the computer is pulling the data, encrypting it, and then I can use like one-way encryption so that it's not. You can't immediately.
You need to decrypt it in order to watch it. But the idea is that you couldn't play back in the vehicle at the time. You'd have to put it into something else with the appropriate key. But
if somebody,
it's the convenience factor though is lost, and a lot of companies are looking at this as something that is that they're selling you to make your life easier. And if they had to make you like jump through all these hoops to do things the most secure way, well, they're not gonna have a huge customer base for that.
Yeah, it's I guess we need more of the customer base for people who are paranoid about security.
It's not paranoid when they're really after you.
Yeah, I mean, and there is a place for things that are not like super super secure. Like I brought up the example, I'm going to be talking about this gun box thing. It's not very secure, but you might not need it to be. You might only care about something that deters a kid from messing with it, but isn't super secure.
The best advice I ever heard about, particularly with locks, was from Matt Blaze. Somebody asked him, what kind of lock do you have on your house? It's like, one that's slightly better than my neighbor's. You don't make yourself a target. It's a deterrent. Not to say like encryption can be broken given enough time and resources. Could be the lifespan of the universe that it takes, but assume that it could be, and you're just making it really, really, really difficult. The vehicle theft thing. It's if you can make it so that not that flippers can do it, but the stuff you're getting off the dark web for a couple $100 from China that's built into a Bluetooth speaker, if you can make it not work for that, well, you just raise the bar. Now you're making it more costly for the attacker. It's going to take longer, more complicated. You can't just like hand this thing to somebody on the street and say, "Hey, go steal a car."
The other one I'd really like to, I'm planning at some point to do a video about like how to secure your house against break-ins. And, people always ask me like, how do you stop lockpicking lawyer from getting into your house? And I'm like, well,
buy him a beer, make him your friend.
Well, the thing is I don't need to stop lockpicking lawyer from breaking into my house.
Yeah, you really screwed up if he's coming after you.
Like, I don't know what his YouTube channel makes, but I'm gonna guess it's well into 6 figures a year. He's not breaking into my house because he doesn't care. Like he could buy my house. I would sell it to him if he wanted. Whereas, the guy who is breaking into your house isn't somebody who spent like 1,000 hours on learning to pick locks. It's a guy with a meth addiction and a crowbar.
A brick.
Yeah. And it's like, let's look at your attack profile. But cars are one of those things that because they're so valuable, the attack profile can include sophisticated attackers who have time to create like custom tools. And yeah, so.
But then again, you have to consider that, well, if I shove a gun in your face, probably comply. Give me your keys, in which case, bye.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is there's always a failure point, and eventually the failure point is you. And if you go to some African countries had real problems with carjackings. And so one of the security measures that was created was a thing that requires a fingerprint. And it wasn't installed in a whole lot of vehicles, but there were reports of criminals cutting hands off.
Malaysia on the case where there was an executive, they carted around in the trunk for a while because it required a fingerprint to start the engine. It was like $100,000 Mercedes or whatever. They got tired of that and they just removed the finger. And so yeah, that's why you don't necessarily want to use biometrics because your token revocation is very painful.
There's a certain point where you want to be able to turn over the access, right? There's that famous XKCD comic about what people think the FBI will do. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna hack this and whatever else, and oh no, he's using whatever encryption, and it's like what they would actually do. Hey, I'm gonna hit them with this hose until he gives me the password.
I think it was a wrench, but yeah, it's the situation. But it's making it so that you're raising that bar to where somebody now has to go. It's not where they actually have to face another person. Like not everybody can do that. It's I'm just out in a parking lot in the middle of the night. No one's around. I feel safe as bad guy versus having to do something far more active and carries far larger amount of consequences too.
I mean, my take on that is that's like, as a defense against the government, we have to hit you with a wrench is fantastic because that gets me a win. Like if they get my passwords from beating me with a wrench, I've probably defeated the criminal justice system. But if it's like organized crime, I want to be able to like to open the, I want to be able to like not go through the wrench procedure and be like, you know what, we're good. We're okay. So I point this out with like people wanting to ban pepper spray and people wanting to ban. It's like if you ban pepper spray, a lot of them will go back to getting guns.
Or if you leave the carve out for like bear spray, it's like there's an equivalent available.
Yeah,
it's supposed to use on humans, but that's not going to stop somebody.
When they banned pepper spray, there was actually a jump in robberies with guns because people who were robbing stores with pepper spray, and then a lot of them have switched to bear spray. But yeah, they, it's a certain point where if you took bear spray entirely off the market, you'd get more gun robberies.
If you ban flipper zeros, only criminals will have flipper zeros.
Well, I mean, if you don't remove the incentive for stealing the cars, eventually the solution is like carjacking at a traffic light. And that happens a lot.
Yeah, just pointing out I have RFID implants as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm nervous about that because it's cool. But at the end of the day, it's like, do I really want my security system to be something that might have to be dug out of me?
Well, in my particular case, this one's an NFC tag, and it's actually my business card. So I can hold out to the person and say, "Oh, here's my card." And they're like, "What?"
Tap your phone.
This one was basically the equivalent of one of these HID prox cards. And previous job, I actually cloned my work ID into my hand, and I could do the Jedi thing, which is kind of cool. But again, it's I'm not using it for anything I am really needing to keep super secure. It's a convenience thing. You literally have to like rub up against the reader to get a read out of the thing. It's not that they can read it from satellites.
Yeah. Somebody says, does that mean RenderMan is a cyborg? Yes.
Some definitions I am. I also have a magnet installed. Paper clips.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So lots of cool little features there. Well, thank you so much for coming on because I can, as a lawyer, I can sort of like learn this stuff enough to maybe not embarrass myself and to maybe ask good questions. But you're the guy who like actually, knows all this. So I see no, don't end it. Let's get to some super chats here because we got. So RenderMan YYC sent in 10 gifted memberships, and Gray Clouds sent in 5 gifted memberships. This one we talked about controlling car companies. I think it's more of a liability issue, and just telling people hey, people should be better aware of the security risks and better aware of those things, right?
Don't park your car in the dark alley with no lights around, and give people the opportunity to do these things.
Yep. And this is the other thing. There's a video about a guy in Canada who tracked his stolen cars, moved by train, then ship, and the police would not touch it even when they look at the train ship. It was that's a problem there. Police are often hamstrung, and often even in situations where they have the power to do something, they won't. And where I see that is a lot of like revenge porn stuff, where you've got like some girl, and it's usually a girl, not always, breaks up with a guy, and the guy says basically, you will do X or I will send your pictures out on the internet. I'm like, that's enough to get a warrant. Like they can go in and seize the guy's electronics to prevent this crime and to recover the evidence, but they don't. So I'm like, why not? Like, why aren't you doing this? So yeah. So that's always an issue. Most cars that get stolen here don't get rekeyed and sold. They get chopped and sold for parts. That said, do you know of any vulnerabilities with the newer Chevys? Been eyeing the new electrics. So I don't know. Do you know anything about the new Chevys?
So even the electric cars are still CAN bus based. It's just a different drivetrain and actually far more electronics. The Tesla's had a few recalls and issues with like their the cards to get into the cars and everything like that too. So it shows that the one kind of nice thing with having a lot of this stuff electronics though is that in certain cases you can actually just upload new software and fix the problem. It's not a physical recall where they have to like replace a huge part. It's just they can push an update or whatever. But when those when those updates fail, you can run into problems too. Bricking cars is always a fun thing to consider.
Well, the other one that I always worry about with the electric cars is things like, can I get it to overcharge the battery? And especially, can I get it to overcharge the battery remotely? Like, because if I could, then maybe I can set somebody's house on fire over the internet. That's a worry I have. This is an interesting question. Do you have a medical bracelet or something so that if you go into the hospital, they know to pick those things out if you go in for an MRI?
So everybody I've talked to says with the MRI, it's that your hand may move. It's not going to suddenly fly out of you, but your hand may like do a thing. But that is something to consider. But it's
The
generally, if I'm in an MRI and I'm unconscious for whatever reason, like there's a larger problem that they need to deal with, then I'm willing to have a small problem here to fix the larger one elsewhere.
The other one that concerns me is doing stuff with like a Dremel and metal. Because if you get little tiny bits of metal in your eye, they want to possibly do like an ocular exam before that. So that I worry about, because it's like, how would they know?
Well, it's actually turned out to be a really handy thing. Taking up a lot of woodworking and that, and I'm just like, oh, you drop a bunch of screws. I just got them all.
Pook, don't pook. This is a fun one. How is airport security?
So usually when I'm often when I'm traveling, I'm carrying a carry-on suitcase full of sex toys in hand-cut foam. They don't care about what the magnet or RFID flats I have. I don't like these don't set anything off or anything like that. But it's usually I've created a bigger scene over here that they need.
You give them other problems to worry about.
Well, it's not something that they're not. They've seen sex toys in hand luggage all the time, just not usually in bulk.
Not like 40 of them packed in like a gun case with like the hand cut foam so that each one neatly sits there. I'm just picturing like the Matrix scene where he walks through the metal detector and they're like, okay, do you have any keys? And he opens up his jacket, but it's just dogs.
My favorite was going through security. He opens the thing up, looks. He's like, where are you going again? Vegas. You could just hear him like muttering under his breath. Dude knows how to party.
Now, was that for a hacker conference?
Yeah,
or I also know they have the because I'm like,
no, I haven't got AVNs or anything.
I was like, there's a couple of conferences that could be. I was actually surprised when I went to SHOT Show that they're like, I was like, oh yeah, I mean there's this one conference. And they're like, there's actually 3 conferences right now, and I was like, oh. And the guy at the hotel's like, yeah, 3 conferences, SHOT Show. He says that might actually be the smallest of them. And I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, no, there's also the AVN show, which is huge. And there's the concrete show. And he said, of all the 3 of them, the one that brings in that has the most money behind it is the concrete show. They have a conference for like concrete builders. And apparently it's huge money because everything is made out of concrete. So I was like, not where I was thinking. So yeah, he was like, SHOT Show's big, but there's other. So
opposite DEF CON for a number of years was the RollerCon, the roller derby convention. And it was great because a bunch of the roller derby girls would come over to our parties because we partied harder than they did.
I was gonna say I've heard DEF CON parties pretty hard. I want to go to a DEF CON. I haven't ever been to one. So I've got some people suggesting I should try to go this year. I'm just like, it's gonna be tough to make it there. I want to go. One of my Patreon supporters is like, if you make it there, I will take you and like, there's a Scotch tasting. I'm like, okay, cool. So,
I know who that is.
What's that?
I think I know who that is.
Kyle Fox.
Oh, okay, not who I
thought. And I mean, there'd probably be Deviant there, who's always good to hang out with. Lockpicking lawyer. I don't know if, like, does he wear a name tag at those things?
No. It's one of those that all his videos are his hands. I don't even know.
I met him at a different event.
He opened his mouth, it might, but
yeah, I met him at a different event, and I was like, I know that voice because he's got a very distinctive voice. He's actually a super nice guy. I really enjoyed chatting with him. So one of these days, I've got a gun box that I want to build. And if I build it, I want to send it to him and be like, game on. So
he accepts those challenges and make short work of some of them.
I mean, that's the thing is I think I've got a good design, but the other reason to send him a design and say game on is because he might be like, buddy, you missed this, and pop, there we go. It's over, it's done. And then you got to armor that point and wherever else.
And that literally is what we're coming back to, is that the people testing this stuff sometimes aren't the ones being paid for it. So you need to take don't take the tools away from people who want to check the stuff for themselves and protect themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, so many of his videos are, I beat this with a bit of pop can, I beat this with a bit of bent wire, I beat this with a pen, I beat this with all sorts of stuff. And like those kinds of things, you don't want to ban pens and bent wire and so forth, but you want to know if your thing is vulnerable to that. Like,
and
if I'm
getting chastised or have the book thrown at you for pointing out that, hey, this lock is terrible, here's why. When the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah. Alberta, where we both live, is ridiculous about lockpicks, and like that is idiotic, right? Because really, if you should be able to figure out, like, I want to have a lock that I can't pick because I don't have any skills, right? So yeah, I don't know.
The side too is that there are locks, and all have those situations where we've had to open a lock that we legitimately need to get into and everything.
Yep.
Is lost, unavailable, whatever. Yeah, picking is not as fast as like bolt cutters, but sometimes you don't want to destroy the lock. It's a useful life skill that is not like talking to law enforcement and stuff like that. I've yet to run across a case where somebody is using lock picks, and that's the only thing they get nailed. Usually
I'm aware of
back of a Best Buy at 3 a.m. or something.
I'm aware of one in Alberta in the history of ever, and that was a guy who was a locksmith who started breaking into ATMs. Yeah.
And that is going to be extraordinarily rare.
Other than that,
I've opened locks with a banana, so like, do we ban bananas?
Other than that, I've seen police think that something was a lockpick, and it's never been a lockpick. Like, it's never been
their jewelry, but they're also functional lockpicks.
I've seen, the police. There was one where the police were like, "This guy has a lockpick because he had a bit of bent coat hanger, and coat hanger doesn't fit into a keyway." So I was like, "This is not a lockpick." And I asked the guy what it was. It was a criminal tool. He was using it to fish mail out of mailboxes, like the apartment mailboxes. He'd like ghost in behind somebody, and then he'd push that through the mail slot of each of those mailboxes and pull up. And he was hoping for gift cards or credit cards or anything like that. That was it, right? So I'm like, it's not a lockpick. And yeah, I've never seen a lockpicking file. I had one where they thought it was lockpicking, and they brought in a locksmith expert, and the locksmith expert was like, "Nope, not picked. Like nobody ever picked this." So
the interesting thing for me is my interpretation of the regulations. Again, not a lawyer, was that anything that interacted with the pins or tumblers of the lock was considered a lockpick. But if you had a bypass tool, something that reached under the door to grab the handle and pull it, that wasn't interacting with that. So that wasn't covered by those regulations. It'd probably be like instrument of crime, but it's not exclusively forbidden by the lock. And there's actually, those bypass tools are far more effective and faster than a lockpick.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you want to get into like a hotel room, those bypass tools are super effective. Go on Deviant Olive's channel and you'll see tons of him, demonstrating just how effective those are. Lockpicks aren't super common. They're just not really used by that. This is an interesting one about your pen testing work. You make legal agreements that protect you from liability or absolve you from crime.
Yep, as we at the very beginning of this thing said, it's I'm playing cops and robbers. I get to be the robber, but I get a get out of jail free card. It's the agreement of we want you to do this. But at the end of it, you spend a lot of time writing a report that tells you how and what you did. Not a jail free card.
I mean,
you didn't tell them that, then there's a problem.
Somebody was saying somebody was asking me like, "Oh yeah, I bet it's really cool being a pen tester." I was like, it's going to be a day of cool stuff, maybe, but mostly you're going to be spending your time writing up reports. You're going to be saying, "I saw this lock at this place. This lock has a known vulnerability. You might want to replace it. I saw this thing. Here's how somebody would get through it. Here's how you stop doing that. Like, here's how you stop them from doing that." Maybe you want to put a little piece of metal here so that somebody can't snake a tool in that curves around and undoes the lock, because people make tools like that. The one I've always thought about locksmithing tools is, does it include things like a pinning set? Because you can't break into a house with a pinning set.
Yeah.
There is some mischief I could get up to with a pinning set, and I want to know this partially because I want to use, I've got a couple of video ideas that I want to do with a pinning set. One showing like, hey, you don't actually know if your Airbnb is actually that secure. And because of things like, okay, we're leaving one actual pin, but we're just wafering the rest of the rest of them. And now we've created a lock that any idiot can pick with like a piece of twig.
Or magnet in the straight plate so that the latch doesn't fully engage, and use the credit card trick.
Yeah, all of these. The other one I want to do is talking about forensic evidence and why a lot of forensics are bad, and using a bunch of gimmicked locks, like set with particular pinnings, as a demo, and just being like, let's show the problems with this philosophy of forensics, using these locks. Like, here is how we actually do testing scientific method kind of stuff. And the problem is if you go to a locksmith and you're like, can I give you a specific set of pinnings that I want for a bunch of these locks? The locksmith will typically tell you to go F yourself. In fact, I've been told to go F myself by several locksmiths because the instant you're like, so I want this one pinned to, and you give them the numbers and they're like, I am suspicious.
I just built relationships with locksmiths, and because they noted immediately when I walked in, I was using the proper terms. They're like, "Are you in the industry?" I'm like, "Adjacent." Yeah, when we're
like,
comparing the fact that we both, their business and me personally have a safe auto dialer. We're comparing notes on the usage of that and stuff. You make friends, but it really sounds like you need to find a better locksmith, because if you're going in and telling them what you need, there are times where it's like, well, no, I've got a bunch of keys that have that bitting. I need locks keyed to that because I don't want to replace all these keys.
The problem gets to things like, I want you to make a lock that has one, 6 pin, and then the rest are just wafer stacks. They're like, why would you ever need this? And I'm like, for a stupid YouTube video. And they're like, I don't think we want any part of that. I'm like, come on. So I just want to get a pinning set, and then I could just buy some cheap locks at like Home Depot or wherever. Not even the Home Depot. I could buy them at like the construction recycling, that whatever it is that recycles like stuff from wrecked houses, and just do that. But I don't know if I can get a pinning set legally. It's a problem. I also wanted to address the other part of this one. They typically don't get rekeyed and sold here. Some of them get chopped and sold for parts. Some of them get shipped overseas where they get rekeyed and sold. So your car may end up in, wherever. Next one here, we've got Against the Tide. Unlock even more awesome as the stream. Press the like and share. Thank you so much. Would you recommend the old-fashioned club? I don't.
They are effective at, again, it's deterrent. It's security in layers. Yeah, there's ways to pick those. There's special tools for them. You could just also cut through the steering wheel. So with a lot of the electronics and that in them nowadays, that's a little haphazard. But you get past those, but that's taking an extra few minutes of exposure, and you have to carry a hacksaw with you and everything like that. So it's you're encumbering somebody, which is why like Kia and Hyundai were sending out the wheel locks to the people with the affected cars, because they didn't have the equipment in the car to turn on or anything like that. They didn't want to retrofit the immobilizer back in, so they just went old school, and sometimes that works.
For a while, the club was a bit of a problem, because what they were, one of the problems was that you'd get people who were looking for cars with the club, and the reason why is because they'd bring like a sawzall, saw through the through the steering wheel really quickly, and then use the club to break open the steering column.
Yeah, that's all your tools are already provided for you. That was pre-immobilizer.
Pre-immobilizer. So I don't know. The problem with the club is when they're common, people know how to break through them. When they're uncommon, they provide more of a defense. So the other problem with the club is there's a lot of stolen cars where the club is sitting on the passenger seat because people don't use them reliably. No solution works if you don't use it. And yeah, that's kind of that. Gray Clouds, thank you for the membership there. Peggy Riordan, sorry, off topic. Are you streaming Rust Trial tomorrow? I'm not going to be able to live stream it while it's going on. I am going to do a recap. So I'm going to be watching Rust while I have to do other things. I'm going to listen to Rust and all of that. And after that, I'll do commentary on I'll do a recap of here's what happened today and show critical elements of it. So that'll be sort of how that's going. when we get to Baldwin, because right now it's Hannah Gutierrez. When we get to Baldwin, I will probably block out the time and stream it sort of cover to cover. So, yeah. So on the flipper, I mean, it's really frustrating that they're going to ban. I mean, at the end of the day, this thing is probably really useful to you as a security researcher. It is not super. I can play tricks with it. That's really what I can do.
Yeah. I've got a whole bit of various hacker gadgets that are basically just simple implementations of our existing attack. It just makes it now down to a I push a button and it does a thing.
Here's an attack that's so well known that now you could just buy a thing where you push a button and it does it.
Yeah. Again, it's if your product fails, to a flipper zero, it's like then your product sucks.
Yeah.
Your product's bad and you should feel bad. Because the problem isn't the flipper. It's also open source, so you can't stuff that genie back in the bottle. But the things like with the car codes is it can record a fob from a distance as long as it's not near the car, replay it once and open the door, but it won't work again after that.
You basically have to have
like a list of common ones or something to certain vehicle models, because I think there was a 2018 Nissan or a Mazda, one of the two, that has a vulnerability where they didn't actually roll the code. If you caught one code, it would continue to work for ever after. Again, that's a failure to implement the security properly.
The 90s had that period where like garage doors and whatever were vulnerable to the replay attacks, and I mean that was just a massive what do you call it? That was just a massive security failure. Like, if you can read the code and send it back and it'll just keep working, that's like they clowned themselves on that. Yeah, and this is a comment. It's an underpowered piece of crap compared to anything else I can bring to bear at Script Kiddies tools. Yeah.
I mean, I got Hacker F, two Hacker Fs, idiots. Like, there's so many different ways to do so many of these attacks that this some of the stuff's a lot bigger, more cumbersome. Might need a laptop attached to it or something. All the pieces are there. It's just somebody went and duct taped everything together in a nice little package, slapped a dolphin on it, and called it a day.
I mean, the
it's
dolphin
really good for the party tricks, but it's not useful for more than just being, like I said, party tricks or being a jerk.
I mean, I will probably carry this around just for those moments when you're like at the bar and you're like, the volume's at like 62 and maybe it could be at like 40. My
favorite usually was to like turn on SpongeBob or something.
Julia says, does it copy a single code or a set of codes? I mean, from what I can tell, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it like it can record a code, like it can read and record the code and show you what the code is in like plain text and replay the codes, but it doesn't have any of the ability to like predict a future code for like a rolling code, or decrypt anything.
So some RFID stuff, it is able to use vulnerabilities in the algorithms and that to like it'll read the card and test things, but you also need the reader, the like door lock, the reader on the lock. It interrogates that and gets some of the information too. And like I said, I was able to do this back a few weeks ago. It took about 45 minutes to do. It could be done, but this was also a very old RFID system, like the sub gigahertz radio stuff. You could send out a list of pulses for whatever you're using. Well, it really depends on what you're trying to attack. In the case of like the key fobs and stuff like that, there's a specific set of in the code, but that code rolls. Now there are other devices. A friend of mine, we're working on a radio controlled system that I won't mention the specifics of, but it's one of those things you don't want to have activated accidentally. There was a test mode that sent out a check to see if everything was communicating without actually activating anything. That if you caught that, changed the last 2 bits, that became the activation code.
Oh,
the implications of this were really bad. And it was because they weren't doing any rolling code or anything like that. They were assuming no one would ever want to attack this.
and I mean, one of the things that where this sort of security really needs to be stepped up is medical devices, because some of the vulnerabilities I've seen about things like pacemakers or insulin pumps and those kinds of things, I'm like, there was one that was published not that long ago that set a pacemaker into a test mode, and the test mode was basically fire endlessly, and they're like, that's concerning.
The trick with that, though, is that you couldn't really do that at a distance. You would have to basically, because whenever they get data or program them, they're basically laying an antenna right on top of you.
Yeah.
So you might be able to do it a few inches, whether or not you could do it like just as you're passing by, maybe. But it's one of those. The implications of it happening are extraordinarily high. Chance of it happening are really low, but it's like, let's see if we could lower the implications to any chance of it happening that is anything above 0 is still scary.
The discussion I saw was something along the lines of an assassination where you had it built into something like a briefcase, and you just corner somebody in an elevator, like hold it up to them, and then walk away as they're having what looks like a heart attack.
Yeah.
Or if you wanted to be more indiscriminate,
Dick Cheney, when he had a pacemaker put in, they didn't put in they disabled the radio functionality just for that reason.
Yeah. They also said, like, if you didn't really care about like indiscriminate, they said you could put it in something like, modify something like a bus seat and build that in, just like having it launch the attack.
Yeah,
and just
now we're into like the Hollywood hack stuff.
Yeah.
I believe it was Bruce Schneier actually had a contest for that. Like, right in like a Hollywood script style, a seemingly plausible but absolutely ludicrous attack.
Yeah, it's like nobody's actually going to do this, but it's still like
to disassemble a bus seat, put all this stuff in without being noticed, and you assume that any target worth going after and putting that much in expense is probably not going to be taking public transit.
I suspect that this would much more likely be a concern for like the intelligence and that kind of thing, as opposed to like if you're Dick Cheney, it's a worry. If you're, Joe Roberts, you don't care. But it is something to, and if it's something that can be done like remotely or whatever else, you end up with problems of like, what if you've got that one jackass? Because as much as there's like no motivation for it, every once in a while somebody lobs cinder blocks off of bridges, and that's sort of the concerns you get on that. So yeah, it's a worry. So all right, where can people find you if they want to check out more of your stuff and so forth?
So renderlab.net is my website. I really don't do much of anything with it anymore. A lot of my stuff's on Twitter, shit, or whatever people are calling it now. My handle is iHackedWhat, and Internet of Dongs are the two main ones. Yeah, I'm around. It's not hard to find my info. I see a lot of like questions direct to me in the chat. Feel free to hit me up. I like talking about this stuff, as you can tell. In here 2.5 hours. So.
I mean, I gotta say, it is a way cooler job than mine. That's the end of things.
It gets a little too exciting when my job suddenly requires employing people of your persuasion to get out of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a whole other topic. The number of there have been pen testers who've had trouble or The other one is
That's
people
not-
who start playing around with like gray areas where they're like, I'm testing some security vulnerability, but I'm testing it in the wild. And that can be interesting. Where you've got, somebody who gets busted because they've broken their way into, like an apartment building, and apartment building, those elevator control, like those gate controls are pretty insecure typically, but they're like, I was just testing. It's like, yeah, okay, you're just testing, but
Again, you got to have the get out of jail free card, agreements and waivers and all that fun stuff. So.
Yeah, make sure you got the card. Make sure you're not like, there is not really a thing for like unofficial casual pen testing on other people's property. So if you go on the Internet of Dong site, you'll see a big list of like, here are pieces of equipment we'd like to test with. And, it's because they're not going to like a sex store and testing it on the stuff on the shelves. You don't want to do any of that stuff. So also as a reminder, if you do actually use some piece of equipment, like even a legal piece of equipment to actually break into a car, then they can charge you for that. Like, including if you use this as a brick to smash the window. Like, so don't crime people.
Don't steal cars. It's easy.
Don't steal cars. And also, if you're going to try, this is not the tool for it. So, yeah. All right. I will roll the outro here and see everyone next time.